So I'm going to cover the digital transformation journey that we've been through in DVSA, and we're still on, in fact. And I am head of digital there, so I'm in the Digital Services and Technology Directorate. I'm responsible for the digital by default change portfolio that we have in DVSA, which is quite a significant portfolio of services. So DVSA, a few words about DVSA. DVSA is an executive agency of the Department for Transport, and we're a central government executive agency. It's a £360 million business, so as government agencies go, it's not huge, but it's kind of in the middle territory there. We have 500 operational sites right through the UK, and 5 major administrative sites, and about 4,500 staff. And that's since we merged VOSA and DSA, so vehicle testing and driver testing broadly. And there are a lot of interactions with DVSA throughout the UK. So, for example, in our vehicle testing business, we do 42 million MOT tests per annum, and that's underpinned by a digital by default MOT service. We test near 1 million heavy vehicles per annum too, and we do operator licensing for getting on for 100,000 vehicles per annum. And we test drivers too, so almost 2 million theory tests per annum, and just over 1.5 million practical driving tests. So there's a strong road safety overtone, and it's about safer journeys for everybody. And we test vehicles and we test drivers broadly. So if I drill into that a little bit, I mentioned MOT as a service. MOT is one of the biggest transactional services in government, and it's something that I've been pretty heavily involved in over the last 18 months now. So we have 80,000 users in over 20,000 garages, and it's a £65 million scheme in its own right. So MOT garages pay a slot fee, and then they charge, that's about £2, just over £2, and then they charge the customer, the public with a car 3 years or older, in an average territory of about £35 per test. And that service underpins about £6 billion of car tax revenue, and in its own right it's quite a significant revenue service. So 30 million test passes per annum and a £35 average fee adds up to over £1 billion of revenue. And then if you add the repair fees that garages charge for tyres, brakes, exhausts and what have you, on top of that, it's over £2 billion per annum. That's about £200 per failed test on average. So quite a significant scheme. And we retired the legacy Atos mainframe service last year, at the end of September last year. And there have been a lot of exemplar services in government launched onto gov.uk, but not many of them have actually taken out an entire legacy system, such as we did with MOT. And we're quite proud of that, because that reduced the run cost of the service by 50%, and that equates to over £10 million per annum. So this is a £100 million saving over 10 years, which is very significant and delivers value to the business and to government and ultimately to the public. We've learned a lot in delivering that service, and in terms of it being a modern digital by default service based in the cloud on Amazon. I'm going to talk more about the tech as we move on. We've done over 200 releases to live since October last year, which is not big in Amazon terms, but pretty damn big in government terms. So in digital, DVSA Digital is my part of the business. What do? We deliver digital by default services, so those are services that are so good broadly that people choose to use them over legacy channels like phone or paper or physical visit. And we do that using agile methodologies, agile governance and continuous delivery principles. So it's very much a DevOps culture that we operate in digital and DVSA. And that means that we can release business benefit early, and it is all about delivering value broadly and meeting researched user needs. And on that journey, we're building sustainable capability to operate and improve and support those services at a lower price point than we would have to do in an outsourcing model. So the traditional model in government has been outsourced service provision to large system integrator type vendors, IBM, Fujitsu, Atos, Capita, there are a lot of them. And those contracts run over 10 years typically. That cycle is breaking now, so we're looking at insourcing some of those provisions, and we're looking at aggregating those services out and using agile techniques to deliver them and engaging a different slate of vendors, so small, medium enterprises, and some of the bigger companies can do this stuff pretty well too. IBM were a pioneer in agile delivery, so That all comes together broadly to deliver value. And if we can insource the operation in support of these things, then we can deliver a very significant saving. So on MOT, I have 5 teams deployed delivering the services that we're building. And that is a live service now, so we're operating and improving it and adding new features to it and using data and research to deliver some of those insights. And that costs in the order of about £1 million a month from those vendors for the phase of delivery that we're in now. So the rationale with insourcing is to save money. An internal team is in the order of 500k per annum, an Agile team. Agile team is between 8 and 15 people typically, and we build up scaled Agile delivery across units, multiple units in that order. And that can deliver 7-figure savings. So a vendor team is about 3 million per annum. So very significant. Just on MOT, you're looking at several £1 million of savings through delivering internally. But it's difficult to insource everything. So in project phases, you tend to deliver a bigger backlog, and then eventually you'll iterate to a point where you're happy with the service and your volume of change is smaller, and then you can rely on an internal CI team. So that's our strategy. I'll talk more about capabilities as we move on. And we need to create a delivery-focused culture around that with our vendors and with our internal teams that is invested in creating benefit and delivering value and meeting research user needs. So a delivery model is an integrated service delivery and run function. So it's not a silo model where an application vendor would hand to an integration vendor, would hand to a test vendor, would hand to a release vendor and a run vendor. And I've seen paths to live of 6 weeks and above working in that kind of model, and it's very expensive on time material type of engagement. So we broke that, and we brought everything together, and we operated in a much flatter structure using Agile governance and delivery techniques. So we have an integrated service delivery and run function, integrated project and run. We run change advisory boards every day, and we release new functionality every day, typically. So in our world, service management decides what gets done, what's in the backlog, and the prioritization of what's in the backlog. And service management in government means effectively senior product owner in business. So there's a bit of politics and gradeism around some of the terms that are used. But broadly, the service manager owns the service, is responsible for the service and the delivery of that service, and they decide what gets done. And then delivery management and digital owns delivery management broadly, so that's under my remit, decides how it gets done and then does it broadly. And we work on a very integrated model, and it's pretty effective as a delivery technique, and it lends itself to delivering rapid change and good value. So I have Agile teams and a scaled Agile model on MOT, and I'm building a bigger change portfolio now, so I'll talk a bit more about those services on subsequent slides. Most of that is co-located in Nottingham. We're going to open up a new site in Birmingham because we're growing our change portfolio, and we have one distributed team at the moment over in Gdansk, which delivers really good value to us. That's with one of our vendors, Kainos, and they perform really well. So I'm very much in favour of co-locating teams, but some distributed is fine in my experience. Offshoring everything is difficult with Agile delivery to get the kind of velocity and the cadence that you need in terms of delivering these outcomes and service design too. It's not that it can't work, but in this sphere, it's better to have mainly co-located and some distributed. And we govern our delivery through Agile ceremonies. So the usual ceremonies, sprint planning, daily stand-up, scrums, retrospectives, and show and tells. And the teams are very invested in that model, and that's pretty effective for us. And we also then have more formal project boards which run on a monthly basis, which is an assurance body, really. And we bring things like procurement and vendor management and some more fundamental questions about what we might be doing in a non-functional sense, that kind of thing, to that forum. We have spend and digital by default compliance constraints on us, so it's really important within government that value is tested and that we have a fair and competitive market. So DFT, who are our parent agency, GDS, Government Digital Service, and Minister for Cabinet Office are all involved in signing off what gets done. So when I want to do something, delivery and transformation-wise, the service management team will bring a requirement to me, and we will jointly build a backlog through a discovery process for that, and I'll put a paper together and we'll take that to DFT, GDS, MCO, get some money signed off, and then we procure vendors competitively through the digital outcomes and specialist framework typically is what we use for Agile delivery, and then we proceed and deliver those outcomes. So it's quite a lean structure that we operate in governance terms. And the portfolio is growing, so I've talked about MOT. which is one of the big digital by default services in government in terms of volume of transaction and in terms of revenue. And in terms of road safety as well. So, the user need here is to have safer vehicles for safer journeys for all of us broadly. So it's a really important service in that public value sense too. We also have OLCS, which is about operator licensing for heavy vehicles, so that we have compliant, safe operators of fleets on our roads. And commercial vehicle services, which is the MOT equivalent for testing heavy vehicles. So that's one that we're just finishing discovery on now, and we'll be going to a delivery phase in the new year to start to transform that service in the same light as we did with MOT. And then we have driver and rider services too. So that's the practical driving test and all of the associated services that sit under that. And I have 3 things, excuse me, that I want to achieve with those services. So the first thing is to retire legacy contracts and technology. So we have a very mixed and convoluted tech stack in government broadly in a lot of these agencies. So DVLA and DVSA alike, have got a lot of legacy technology in there. And commercial vehicle services is underpinned by a fairly horrible legacy stack that is about 20 years old now. And we don't change anything, and it operates quite happily on a daily basis, but if we did run into a significant defect or data problem, then it would be hard to remediate. So we're going to change that, and we're going to bring it into the cloud. And my favorite approach at the moment is to build out MOT. In fact, I'm going to talk a bit more about this and the context behind it as we go on. But we look actively for innovation and synergy and common ground across all of the services that we deliver. And then driver and rider services is about practical driving test and the associated services there. And that's underpinned by a pretty horrible legacy technology stack as well. So we'll be transforming that too. So retire legacy tech and contract and change the contract model into a shorter, typically 2-year, digital by default, cloud-based platform. Amazon Web Services is the platform of choice for us at the moment. There are others out there. We do some stuff on Azure too. So there are lots of options there. And we're going to move across that portfolio and deliver a really significant volume of change over the next 2 to 3 years. So the transformation journey that we've been on has been interesting. And starting at the bottom, all was not well with the MOT project when I came to DVSA last year. So the first thing was to turn around that project. And that had suffered from some questionable decisions in architecture terms and suffered from an imposed operating model which set the vendors against each other and got them working in silos, which is totally the wrong thing to do in terms of agile delivery. You want to get people working together in blended multi-vendor teams and invested in delivering value from the service backlog, so common goals broadly. So we changed the model, we flattened the model. I exited some of the people who were causing some culture fit issues, should we put it that way. And after a very intensive 6-week period of delivery activity, where I didn't sleep at all really, and I'm still recovering from that, we did turn off the legacy mainframe service at the end of September, and we put the new MOT2 service to public beta launch with all of the users on it and all of the transactions going through it. There were some performance issues in the beginning because we hadn't had time to properly performance tune the app before it went live, but we got through those in a couple of weeks, and the service is now operating really well. So we set up then beta to live phase in that service, and I've done it subsequently in the OLCS, which also suffered from some delivery issues, and we've now turned that around, and that's going to launch to public beta on the 14th of November. So we set up beta to live phases, whereby if the public beta release is the minimum viable product, the MVP, we iterate on that product and we improve it, rather than going on a feature hunt to add new functionality. We look at the non-functional requirements, we look at trends from data and user research, and we improve what's there so that it is accurate in terms of meeting user needs and business needs. That's the most important thing. So we do that in the beta to live phases. And I introduced a layer of agile governance across all of this. And broadly, I'm going to talk about that on subsequent slides, but broadly that was about putting a structure in to improve the probability of us doing the right thing in the right way with the right capability. Because time materials contracts are really expensive. We spend a lot of money on vendors. I mentioned the run rate on MOT is in the order of £1 million a month. So across 5 teams, if we get a sprint which is doing something nugatory, if there's something in the backlog that shouldn't be where it is or is not representing user needs, then that's a really big deal. because there's 200k immediately of burn that is nugatory just in that sprint. And you'll have to do the right thing later too, so you can double that. So you're knocking on for £500,000 for a bad decision. We need to have structures in place to mitigate against that, and that's what Agile Governance has been about. And it's been really effective, and we're coming to a second iteration, which I'll talk about. And all of that has built up to us having a portfolio view. So I mentioned the 4 transformation services that we're going through now. And we're looking at those as a combined portfolio of services, whereby we have multiple service backlogs. So there's a service backlog for each of those services, a master backlog, and then the individual teams within them will have functional, non-functional backlogs of their own, and they all consolidate up. And I've also changed the currency to look at feature delivery rather than epic and story, which are concepts that non-technical stakeholders don't understand, and I've had to explain countless times now, actually. To coin a phrase, I wish I had a pen for every time I've done that. But broadly, I'm changing it to feature delivery, and I'm going to talk about that as we move on with some diagrams. All of that comes together to mean that I can matrix my delivery capability across those multiple services and backlogs. And that's a really big deal, because that means I can save a lot of money, and I can bring a lot of consistency into what we deliver and how we deliver it. So, Agile governance, right things, right ways, right capability. And that underpins the delivery of a digital portfolio and the transformation of our services and the transformation of our agency as a business and our building of sustainable capability and the modernization of our technology. So this is a pretty strategic thing for the agency and for government, and we're starting to share that out across different departments in government now and with GDS. So the first iteration was done on the MOT service, and I built it up over a 6-month period, and I put new control artifacts in. That was the immediate burning issue that I had. So different artifacts, non-waterfall artifacts for planning, spend tracking, and quality, which were aligned to sprints, not to more legacy milestone tracking, with no view of what the actual delivery roadmap was and what the actual service backlog was. So that was a fundamental change in the turnaround journey. And I brought a new service design process in, which I'm going to go through on the next slide. And that was fundamental too, in terms of deciding to do the right things and basing them on data. And I brought a value matrix too. So that was a tool, effectively, that the product and service teams could use to give an arbitrary measure of value to epics and features within the backlog. So it's not the only measure, but it is a measure. And that works across policy and legislative need. So if there's something we have to do from a policy perspective, for example, if we changed the nature of one of the schemes at the moment, MOT is an outsourced scheme, commercial vehicle services is something that our operations staff do in authorized testing facilities. So if we also outsource commercial vehicle services as a concept, I mean, that's not on the table right now, but it's something that might happen in the future, then that would introduce a big policy change, and it would mean that we had to do something to change the service to cater for that. Then we have user need, and that's the most important and most frequent measure that we have for assigning value. So we research user needs across every service and every backlog that we deliver pretty religiously. And that drives a key metric for the service teams in terms of deciding what needs to be done. We ask users, we do scientific research with users, and then we build things that meet the needs of those users in a lean and efficient way. And that was good. That worked on MOT. It helped me turn around MOT as a service and get it delivered and turn off the legacy system and save a lot of money per annum. But now we have a wider portfolio, and I'm going to scale up our Agile governance model to work across that portfolio. So I'll be building an Agile PMO function that sits across that portfolio to track spend and planning and quality and bring all of those things together, and also to handle some of the people outcomes in terms of building capability within the agency. As I described, it's really important that we insource some of the operation improvement of these services. So that's going to sit in Agile PMO. I'm moving to a feature delivery model, which I'm going to describe as we move on. And I'm going to build a consistent software delivery lifecycle and CI process geared around continuous delivery principles to deliver change rapidly and deliver value rapidly, and to enable us to deliver value to the business and to the user more rapidly too. So that's pretty key. And in Techie Web Ops terms, we're going to build a multi-pipeline model based on blue-green deployments of zero downtime deployment using some of the best tooling within Amazon Web Services. So that's going to underpin multiple backlogs in multiple services with effectively the same code base. And that's going to save a lot of money too. The saving is going to be in the order of £1 million per service, so it's pretty significant to build out on code that is already proven and has already been delivered. And the less tangible gain from that is that we can deliver value sooner in those services rather than a several months build-out process for the continuous integration pipeline. I can take a known quantity that's proven and I can push code through it with a minimal amount of configuration, actually. So that's really valuable as a concept. I'm going to iterate the control artifacts. We have a portfolio view. So individual services will matrix up to a master backlog, which will be built on a service saga feature model. And I'm going to talk about that as we move on. And I'm going to define a consistent operating model for a delivery based on this. So, service design. This is a diagram that some of my design guys put together for me based on the things that I was harping on about constantly in terms of making decisions based on data and insights from user need. And I call it the snail diagram. And that didn't make them terribly happy. They like to call it the service design wheel. But service design wheel is a bit generic, so I prefer snail, so that's what it's called now. And we like to have a bit of fun in these services too. That's really important on a cultural level. So this is the service design snail from DVSA. And it doesn't move at a snail's pace, happily. We start by taking insights from data. So where we have a live service, we configure performance analytics and conversion funnels across the transactional journeys in those services. And we observe what users do and how they transact with the service. And then we make decisions to optimize that service. For example, if you had a 15-step transactional journey that could be done in 13, then that actually would be lucky for some, because you would cut the transaction time. And for MOT tests, if you aggregate that up over multiple tests a day, that might mean that they could do another test, which would be a really big deal in revenue terms for that sector and those 20,000 garages and 80,000 users. So we optimize our journeys based on insights from data. At the earlier stage, where we have no live data or not a live service, where we're early in the build cycle, we take legacy data where it's available. So we look at performance trends, we look at how those services perform, the non-functional requirements for those services, and we draw insights from those. And then we tend to validate those insights with structured user research. So we could do mass user research and go across a big diagonal slice and do surveys and one-to-one sessions and A/B testing and lots of different things of that type with a lot of users. But we prefer to base these things on data and then validate them with research, because the research can be more focused then. And it's easier to aggregate those insights together. And then we do a solution design and service design stage where all of the teams come together and we sit with the service and product teams and we deliver the insights from data and research to them. We decide what to do and how we're going to do it, and then we build. And that is something I'm going to talk about on a feature level as we move on. But broadly, that is a prototype, design, build, test, and accept iterative model within Sprint. And the principle that we live by is that we deliver working software with every sprint, done stories to production every sprint. That's a mantra that we have, and we celebrate that in our show and tell ceremonies every sprint too. Everything we do considers value, and everything we do is based on insights from data and user needs. There is no guesswork. So I'm going to talk about the currency that we have now. I talked about feature delivery as an innovation. So in government, we had services and we had backlogs made up of epics and stories broadly, and we defined some benefits. So the MOT benefit was we're going to turn off the legacy service in simplistic terms and save about £10 million per annum, which is great, but it is not very granular and it is not very easy to track on a sprint by sprint and stage by stage basis. So the model I'm building is to have services, and I've described MOT, OLCS, commercial vehicle services, driver rider services. And within those services, I've got what I call sagas. So again, there's a difference of opinion with some of my vendors. They prefer to call them slices because they think saga is something for old people and what have you, but I think that's a bit silly. It is an Agile term. And I say, well, I know more about Agile than you, and we joke with each other. But a saga is the thing. So if a service is something like MOT testing, then a saga would be test result capture or payments within that service. So it is a thing. And commercial vehicle services is made up out of 6 of those things. And within those you have transactional journeys. And this is the key part of the currency, features. A feature is a transactional journey for a variety of different personas and users. And we map those. We understand who our users are, what the business needs are in a discovery stage, and then we build and design transactional journeys for the users to meet their needs, to meet researched user needs and based on insights from data. And that delivers transformation outcomes to us. And that's important because if we do that well, that service design piece well, then we don't do the wrong thing. And if we don't do the wrong thing, then we don't waste money on nugatory sprints, which cost hundreds of thousands of pounds and add up to millions of pounds. And we prioritize consistently across that portfolio. So moving on, onto a featured delivery level. So how do we do this? We talk about service discovery, where we look at the high-level user needs and business needs for a service. So we want to retire a legacy service, we want to insource it, base it in the cloud, save money, deliver value, and modernize the technology broadly. And we want to do that based on services, sagas, features, epics, and stories. So to deliver a feature, we do something called feature discovery. So having defined the high-level needs, we then go to more detail, and we explicitly research the user needs across a particular feature journey, and we design that journey in detail, and then we prototype, design, build, test, and accept. And that yields what we call a private beta. So that is working software that people can transact with, and that could, in the early stages of a delivery, be dummy data, or later on, after a public beta stage, it could be live data, and people could be doing real transactions based on that. So that's some of the users doing the functionality, and then we iterate on that, which arrives at a public beta. So we make it better. We observe what that limited cohort of users do, how they do it, we improve it, and then we get to a public beta whereby everybody can use that feature. And then we improve that and iterate on that until we can call it live. And that corresponds with service standard assessments, which GDS do, to check compliance with the gov.uk service manual and style guide. And then beyond that point, that live point, it transitions to an internal team that will have been involved in the delivery of the feature to do continuous improvement. And our business benefits are then aligned on a feature level, and we consider them from discovery to live. And as we deliver features, we're able to tick off business benefits broadly as they're delivered, which is a good thing. And that moves us away from a monolithic project-based model, which is a legacy approach, and it means that I can matrix my capability across multiple backlogs and multiple features. So, a bit of techie talk. I'm not going to spend too long on this. So we are building out a web ops infrastructure in Amazon, and that is really important because that delivers an enabling benefit for other services. So commercial vehicle services and driver rider services will be based on the Amazon continuous integration pipeline that we've built for MOT. And that's going to save 7 figures per service just in the build and deployment of that. And more subtly, it's going to mean that we can deliver software, working software sooner, which means that we'll deliver the transformation sooner, which means that we'll realize the higher level benefits sooner for those services. So some of the stages I have left here are improving a non-functional testing environment to be more prod-like and delivering more automation and immutable infrastructure, as we call it, so that the teams can spin up a representative non-functional testing environment automatically and then do their tests and then destroy that environment. So we don't waste money having infrastructure hanging around when it's not being used. Yeah, we build a stack, we test, do the tests that we need, which can be overnight, then we destroy that stack and we move it on. We're bringing environment consistency in, so by the end of December, we'll have that application infrastructure as code in a deployable form across multiple pipelines. And then by the end of January next year, we'll have zero downtime deployment. So that's having blue-green deployment capability. And that's quite a big deal. It's never been done in government on a transactional level. And what that means is that we have our live prod production stack where the service is running. And that is our green stack. And in parallel, we can build a blue stack, which is identical, and we can deploy our change into the blue stack and prove it. The service team will go in and prove that it works, delivers outcomes as expected, and then we flip the load balancer over to point at that, and that becomes live. And if we need to regress, then we can just flip it back. And there is no interruption to service for the user in that journey. Whereas now, we have to take the service down in the evening. It's not that disruptive. It's a process that works pretty well and is quite familiar. But blue-green is a much better model to move to. It's a seamless change model, and it's something that we're really invested in. And then by the end of Q1 next year, we will have our delivery services for CVS and DRS up and running and have multi-branch CI with the first and second iteration on Agile Governance in place on that. So there's a lot of innovation built out in our infrastructure piece. But that's not enough. We're looking at synergies across our portfolio. So if we look at our MOT and commercial vehicle services, for example, this is something I'm doing right now. we can look across that stack at what we have there. So we can look at what we can use and extend as functionality, things like testing, things like inputting data, things like doing payments, things like administering sites broadly, garages, and things like vehicle management and things like delivering notifications as well. There's a lot of common ground there. And the way we share data with sister agencies like DVSA, and the way we report and authorize and our underlying data structures. We can draw common ground from all of those things. And then we can deliver improvements back to MOT as well. So if we build out our test result capture piece features on MOT to also be able to do commercial vehicles, and we build a duplicate database for the commercial vehicle piece, then there's a lot of synergy in that. I think that delivers a 30 to 40% cost saving of doing bespoke build for this, which is a really big deal in the context of a service that's going to consume quite a large investment. So we're looking at doing that actively. So the next few years, just to wrap it up, we're going to deliver at pace business transformation through delivering a digital by default service portfolio. Quite a big portfolio change in DVSA. We're going to innovate, so Agile Governance 2, feature delivery, aligned benefit, matrix and capability, continuous delivery, blue-green deployment, all of these things. There's going to be more firsts. We're breaking a lot of new ground in DVSA. We were the first to deliver a major transactional service to Amazon in government. We were the first to completely retire a legacy solution and move to cloud. So we're quite proud of that. And we're going to continue to build out on our Agile delivery practice, which is some of the best in government now, and the governance around that, to deliver and release benefit on a feature level with the services that we've got. We're going to build capability internally to operate and improve those services and save money through doing that. So I've got a graduate recruitment campaign running right now. I'm going to interview 20 next week for 10 roles, and if I get more of the aptitude that I need, I'll hire more, and that'll mean I can exit vendors. And then we're creating a delivery-focused culture that's invested in delivering value and having fun broadly as we do really good things to deliver value for UK government. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'll take questions now.